"That's just a Halloween costume," Airline supervisor Sandra Mitchell scoffed, dismissing Fire Captain Marcus Rivera like some weekend warrior playing dress-up. His ceremonial blues gleamed under Denver International's harsh lights, but one emergency call would silence every doubter. Captain Marcus Rivera strode through Denver International Airport's gleaming terminal, his polished black boots echoing against the marble floors. His navy blue dress uniform, adorned with gold braiding and ceremonial ribbons of the Denver Fire Department's Honor Guard, commanded attention from every passerby. At 32, Marcus carried himself with the disciplined bearing of a man who had charged into burning buildings for over a decade, saving countless lives in Colorado's most dangerous blazes. Today marked a solemn journey to Los Angeles for the annual 9/11 memorial ceremony honoring fallen firefighters. Chief Daniel Anderson had personally selected Marcus to represent Denver's bravest, requiring him to travel in full ceremonial dress to maintain the dignity befitting such a sacred occasion. He approached the first-class check-in counter for United Flight 847, his golden badge catching the terminal's fluorescent glare. Fire Chief Anderson had authorized the premium seating due to the ceremony's importance and the need for Marcus to arrive in pristine condition for the nationally televised memorial service. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice carrying the calm authority earned through years of emergency command. "Captain Marcus Rivera, Denver Fire Department Honor Guard. I have a first-class reservation." He placed his department ID, driver's license, and digital ticket confirmation on the polished counter. The desk agent, Jennifer, froze mid-keystroke, her eyes widening at the elaborate uniform. The gold cords draped across his shoulders, the ceremonial white gloves tucked into his belt, and the array of commendation ribbons created an imposing sight. Let me get my supervisor," she stammered, clearly unsettled by the formal military-style presentation. Within moments, a sharp-faced woman in a pressed navy blazer approached, her name tag reading, Sandra Mitchell, Flight Operations Supervisor. Her expression immediately soured upon seeing Marcus, her lips pursing with barely concealed disdain. "What's the purpose of this costume?" Mitchell asked, her tone dripping with skepticism as she gestured dismissively at his uniform. Marcus straightened, maintaining his professional composure despite the insulting characterization. "I'm traveling on official department business to represent Denver Fire at the Los Angeles 9/11 memorial ceremony," he explained patiently, indicating his credentials spread across the counter. Mitchell snatched up the ticket confirmation, studying it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This seems highly irregular. We don't typically see people in elaborate costumes on commercial flights." She leaned toward Jennifer, whispering loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear, "Call security for additional verification. This could be some kind of impersonation." 2 airport security officers arrived within minutes, their hands resting casually on their equipment belts. However, after examining Marcus's official fire department identification, badge number verification, and government-issued credentials, they stepped back respectfully. "Everything checks out perfectly, Captain," the senior officer said, returning the documents with a slight nod of professional courtesy. "Thank you for your service." Mitchell's jaw tightened at this validation, but her hostility only intensified. "All this theatrical pageantry seems excessive for a simple flight," she remarked with obvious contempt. "Do taxpayers realize how much these elaborate costumes cost? This looks more like a Halloween party than legitimate travel." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest but maintained his disciplined bearing. "This dress uniform represents fallen firefighters who made the ultimate sacrifice, ma'am. It's worn only with explicit authorization from the highest departmental authorities for ceremonial occasions of national significance." "Well, it's creating a significant disruption in my terminal," Mitchell snapped, her voice carrying across the check-in area and drawing stares from curious travelers. Several passengers had begun forming a loose semicircle, some recording the confrontation with their phones. Returning to the counter, Mitchell held up Marcus's confirmation printout like evidence in a trial. "This first-class ticket costs over $800. How exactly did you acquire such expensive accommodations? These premium seats represent significant taxpayer expense." "As I've explained, Chief Anderson arranged the booking through official department channels." Due to the ceremonial nature of this assignment and the national importance of the memorial service, the fire department authorizes appropriate travel accommodations to maintain professional dignity. An elderly woman waiting in line stepped forward, her voice sharp with indignation. For crying out loud, he's a fire captain. Why are you treating this hero like some common criminal? Mitchell ignored the intervention completely, her focus laser-locked on Marcus with predatory intensity. Mitchell's expression hardened as she sensed the growing crowd of onlookers, their murmurs of disapproval clearly audible. Rather than backing down, she doubled down on her aggressive stance, apparently viewing the public attention as validation of her authority rather than criticism of her behavior. Since you cannot provide direct proof of purchase and have no personal credit card transaction to verify this ticket's legitimacy, I'm afraid we cannot accommodate your first-class seating, she announced loudly, ensuring her words carried to the assembled passengers. For security reasons and due to the irregular nature of this booking, we'll need to reassign you to economy class. A ripple of shocked disbelief passed through the growing crowd of witnesses. Several passengers exchanged incredulous glances, while others began openly filming the confrontation. Marcus processed the blatant discrimination disguised as security protocol, recognizing the impossible standard being applied: no legitimate business traveler carries personal receipts for company-purchased tickets. Ma'am, is there a specific federal regulation or airline policy I've violated? Marcus asked with measured calm, his training in crisis de-escalation evident in his controlled tone. My credentials have been verified by your own security personnel, and my travel authorization is properly documented. A businessman in an expensive suit called out from the boarding area, this is absolutely ridiculous. I've never seen such unprofessional treatment of a first responder. Mitchell whirled toward the crowd, her face flushing red with anger. Sir, this is not your concern. I have full discretionary authority over seating assignments and security determinations. Turning back to Marcus, her voice took on a threatening edge. Your elaborate costume and inability to provide personal verification of this expensive ticket raise serious red flags about potential fraud or impersonation. Costume, gasped a middle-aged teacher traveling with her students. That's a real fire department dress uniform. My brother's a firefighter in Phoenix, I know what the real thing looks like. Jennifer, the original desk agent, shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, clearly distressed by her supervisor's escalating hostility. Sandra, maybe we should. Jennifer, stay out of this, Mitchell snapped. I'm handling a potential security situation. She faced Marcus again, her stance aggressive and confrontational. You have exactly two options: accept economy seating immediately, or reschedule your travel for another day when you can provide proper documentation. The crowd's murmurs grew louder and more hostile toward Mitchell. Someone called out, he just saved my neighbor's house last month. Show some respect. Another voice added, this is discrimination, plain and simple. Marcus glanced around at the faces surrounding him, ordinary citizens displaying more honor and decency than the airline official supposedly serving them. Their support touched him deeply, but he understood that creating a public spectacle would reflect poorly on the fire department he represented and dishonor the fallen firefighters he was traveling to commemorate. A young mother pushing a stroller approached the counter. Excuse me, she said firmly to Mitchell, but my husband's a veteran, and this treatment is absolutely disgraceful. This man risks his life to protect people like us. Mitchell's response was swift and cutting, ma'am, I don't need lectures about my job from passengers. If you don't like our security procedures, you're welcome to fly with another airline. The woman stepped back, shocked by the venom in Mitchell's voice, but the damage was done. The crowd's mood shifted from disapproval to open anger. Several passengers began loudly discussing boycotts and social media campaigns. Understanding that the situation was spiraling beyond control and that his primary duty was to reach Los Angeles for the memorial ceremony, Marcus made the difficult decision to de-escalate. I accept your terms, he said quietly, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. Mitchell seemed almost disappointed by his capitulation, having apparently hoped for a more dramatic confrontation. She quickly printed a new boarding pass, slapping it down on the counter with unnecessary force. Middle seat, 23B. Economy class. As Marcus gathered his documents, several passengers approached to offer support and express their outrage. An older gentleman in a veteran's cap shook his hand firmly. "Son, you handled that with more class than she deserved." Some of us still recognize real heroes. Marcus nodded gratefully, but his mind was already focused on the ceremony ahead and the firefighters he would honor, regardless of the indignities he'd endured. Marcus made his way through the terminal toward the gate, his ceremonial uniform drawing respectful nods and sympathetic glances from passengers who had witnessed or heard about the confrontation. The gold braiding on his shoulders caught the light as he walked with measured dignity, refusing to let Mitchell's treatment diminish his bearing or his mission. At the boarding gate, he noticed several passengers from the check-in area waiting for the same flight. The elderly woman who had defended him earlier smiled warmly and gave him an encouraging thumbs up. The businessman who had spoken out approached him directly. "Captain, I'm Robert Chin, regional manager for Marriott Hotels," the man said, extending his business card. "What happened back there was completely unacceptable. I'll be filing a formal complaint with United's corporate headquarters. That supervisor's behavior was disgraceful." "I appreciate your support, sir," Marcus replied, "but my focus needs to remain on the ceremony I'm attending. Some things are more important than personal slights." When boarding began, Marcus waited patiently for his economy group to be called. The ceremonial jacket, designed for formal presentations rather than cramped airline seats, made navigating the narrow aisle challenging. As he made his way toward the back of the aircraft, passing the spacious first-class seats that should have been his, he maintained his professional composure. Row 23 presented its own challenges. His assigned middle seat was flanked by a businessman typing furiously on his laptop and an elderly gentleman reading a thick paperback novel. As Marcus attempted to settle into the cramped space, his ceremonial cords and ribbons made the process awkward. The elderly gentleman looked up from his book, and his weathered face immediately brightened with recognition. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, his voice carrying the gruff warmth of someone accustomed to command. "A fire department honor guard on my flight. Haven't seen dress blues like those since my son's graduation from the academy." "Good morning, sir," Marcus said, carefully arranging his jacket as he settled into the uncomfortable middle seat. "George Patterson," the man said, extending a calloused hand. "Retired Marine Corps, 28 years. Lost my boy in the towers, he was FDNY, Ladder Company 3. His voice carried both pride and lingering grief. "I recognize that uniform the second you walked down that aisle." Marcus felt a chill of connection and respect. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss, sir. Your son was a hero." George nodded slowly, then leaned closer, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "I saw what happened up front at check-in. That pencil-pushing supervisor had absolutely no right treating you that way. Completely disgraceful behavior towards someone who serves this community." "Just a misunderstanding, I'm sure," Marcus replied diplomatically, unwilling to speak ill of others while representing his department. "Bullshit," George said firmly, his marine directness cutting through Marcus's polite deflection. "That was pure discrimination, plain and simple. I've seen it before. Some people can't stand seeing someone in uniform getting respect they think they deserve." The businessman in the aisle seat glanced over, apparently having overheard. "You're the guy from the terminal, right? That whole scene was recorded and it's already going viral on social media. People are furious about how you were treated." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I'd prefer not to become a social media spectacle, sir. This uniform represents something much larger than personal grievances." George studied Marcus's profile, noting the careful way he held himself even in the cramped quarters. "Heading to LA for the memorial ceremony?" "Yes, sir. Representing Denver Fire Department at the annual 9/11 commemoration." "Fitting," George said quietly. "My Johnny would have appreciated seeing someone like you there." He paused, looking out the small window. "You know, Son, sometimes standing up for yourself is standing up for everyone who comes after you. That supervisor back there. She'll keep treating people badly until someone makes her face consequences. Marcus considered this wisdom as the plane began its taxi toward the runway. The ceremony ahead weighed heavily on his mind, the names he would read, the families he would comfort, the sacred duty of remembrance that transcended personal indignities. "Perhaps you're right, Mr. Patterson," Marcus said finally. "But first, I have fallen heroes to honor." George nodded approvingly. Spoken like a true firefighter. Honor first, justice second. But don't forget about that justice part, son. 35 minutes into Flight 847's journey toward Los Angeles, Marcus was reviewing his ceremonial notes when a sharp cry pierced the cabin's steady hum. "Help! Somebody help me!" The desperate voice came from several rows behind them. Marcus immediately unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, his trained instincts overriding any concern for airline protocol. George grabbed his arm briefly. "Go get him, son." Moving swiftly down the narrow aisle, his ceremonial uniform drawing every passenger's attention, Marcus reached the source of the commotion. A middle-aged man had collapsed in the aisle between rows 28 and 29, his face gray and his breathing labored. His wife knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to rouse him. "Sir, I'm Captain Rivera, Denver Fire Department," Marcus announced clearly, dropping to one knee beside the stricken passenger. "I'm trained in advanced emergency medical response. May I assist?" "Please, yes," the woman sobbed. He just grabbed his chest and collapsed. "His name is David Martinez." Marcus quickly assessed the situation, his fingers finding the man's neck to check for a pulse. The skin was clammy and cool, the pulse weak and irregular. David's lips were taking on a bluish tint, clear signs of cardiac distress. "Flight attendant." Marcus called out with the commanding voice he used at fire scenes. A cabin crew member rushed over immediately. "I need you to notify the captain that we have a passenger in cardiac arrest. Request immediate emergency landing clearance and have paramedics standing by." "Right away," she responded, rushing toward the cockpit. Marcus turned back to David, whose condition was deteriorating rapidly. "Ma'am, what's your husband's name?" he asked the distraught wife while beginning to loosen David's collar and check his breathing. "Maria Martinez," she gasped. "Is he going to be okay? We're on our way to see our new granddaughter." David's pulse suddenly became undetectable, and his breathing stopped completely. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Maria, I need you to step back. David's heart has stopped, and I'm going to begin CPR immediately." The cabin fell silent except for the drone of engines as Marcus positioned himself over David's still form. His ceremonial jacket, with its gold braiding and formal cut, restricted his movement, but he couldn't waste precious seconds removing it. Beginning chest compressions with practiced precision, he counted aloud, 1, 2, 3, 4. Passengers throughout the cabin craned their necks to watch the uniformed firefighter they'd seen humiliated at the gate now working desperately to save a life. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man deemed unworthy of first-class seating was now the only thing standing between David Martinez and death. "AED is coming," called another flight attendant, rushing down the aisle with the automated external defibrillator. After 2 minutes of continuous compressions, Marcus paused to check David's pulse again. Still nothing. He quickly attached the AED pads to David's chest, his hands steady despite the cramped conditions and restrictive uniform. "Everyone clear," Marcus commanded, ensuring no one was touching David. The machine analyzed the heart rhythm, then delivered its verdict, shock advised. Marcus pressed the button, and David's body convulsed as the electrical charge coursed through him. Immediately resuming chest compressions, Marcus continued his life-saving efforts while the plane began its descent toward Salt Lake City for an emergency landing. After another cycle of CPR, Marcus checked for signs of life. This time, he felt a weak but detectable pulse beneath his fingers. "I've got a pulse," he announced, his voice carrying relief and professional satisfaction. "Weak, but present. David, can you hear me?" David's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his features as he tried to understand what had happened. What? "You had a heart attack, sir," Marcus explained gently. "We're making an emergency landing to get you proper medical care. Just try to stay calm and breathe normally." Maria Martinez clutched Marcus's hand through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "You saved his life. How can we ever repay you?" "No repayment necessary, ma'am. This is what we do." The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're making an emergency landing in Salt Lake City. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Emergency personnel will board immediately upon landing." As the plane descended, passengers throughout the cabin began applauding. George Patterson's voice carried from row 23, "That's how a real hero handles business." The applause grew louder, a spontaneous tribute to the firefighter who had literally brought a man back from death. When the aircraft touched down at Salt Lake City International, paramedics rushed aboard within moments. The lead paramedic, a seasoned EMT named Rodriguez, immediately began his assessment while Marcus briefed him on the situation. "Textbook CPR work, Captain," Rodriguez said after reviewing David's vital signs. "His rhythm stabilizing nicely. Another few minutes without intervention, and this would have been a completely different story. You definitely saved his life." As paramedics transferred David to a stretcher, he managed to grasp Marcus's hand. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. "My granddaughter. I get to meet her now because of you." In Salt Lake City's terminal, Marcus checked his watch with growing concern. The delay would make him significantly late for the memorial ceremony's opening tribute. He found a quiet corner and dialed Chief Anderson's direct line. "Chief Anderson speaking." "Chief, this is Captain Rivera reporting. I'm experiencing a significant travel delay that will impact my arrival time for the ceremony." Anderson's tone immediately shifted to concern. "Marcus, the Pentagon liaison shows you're still in Salt Lake City. What happened? You should have landed in LA an hour ago." "Yes, sir. There was a serious medical emergency aboard our flight. We made an unscheduled landing here." "Were you involved in the emergency response, Captain?" Anderson asked, his voice taking on a familiar note of pride mixed with concern. "I provided emergency medical assistance until paramedics could take over, sir. Passenger suffered cardiac arrest mid-flight." A low chuckle came through the phone. The flight captain radioed ahead that a Denver fire captain performed life-saving CPR at 30,000 feet. "That was you, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir." "Outstanding work, son," Anderson said warmly. "But I'm confused about something. How the hell did you end up on a delayed connection? I specifically authorized direct first-class seating to ensure you arrived rested and on schedule." Marcus hesitated, knowing his answer would trigger consequences. "There was a seating issue at departure, sir." "What kind of seating issue?" Anderson pressed, his voice sharpening with the tone Marcus recognized from serious incident investigations. "Upon arrival at Denver International, my first-class reservation was questioned by the flight operations supervisor. I was denied boarding in first class and reassigned to economy seating." The silence that followed was deafening. When Anderson spoke again, his voice carried the cold fury of a man who'd spent 30 years fighting for his people. "Are you telling me that you were discriminated against because you were wearing your dress uniform? I deemed it inappropriate to create a public scene, sir. The uniform represents something much larger than personal indignity, and I didn't want to dishonor the department or the ceremony." Another long pause. "Your restraint shows character, Marcus," Anderson said finally, his calm tone belying the anger Marcus could sense building. "But this isn't just about you anymore. It's about respect for every firefighter who's ever put on that uniform, and especially for the 343 brothers we lost on September 11th. "Which airline?" And who was responsible? United Airlines, sir. Denver International, Terminal B. The supervisor was Sandra Mitchell. I see, Anderson said, his voice dropping to the coldly professional tone he used when dealing with city officials who tried to cut fire department funding. Continue to Los Angeles. I'll handle this situation personally. Sir, I don't want to cause unnecessary trouble. Son, Anderson interrupted, you just saved a man's life while wearing the uniform that woman claimed was a costume. The irony isn't lost on me, and it won't be lost on anyone else when this story gets out. You did nothing wrong. She did everything wrong. Back at Denver International Airport, Sandra Mitchell was reviewing passenger manifests in her office when her phone rang. The caller ID showed David Harrison, United's Regional Director of Operations. Sandra, I need you in conference room A immediately. Suspend all your current duties and report now. Mitchell hurried to the conference room, where she found airline executives, FAA officials, and a man in fire department dress blues whose insignia and bearing marked him as very high-ranking, Chief Daniel Anderson. This meeting concerns an incident involving Captain Marcus Rivera, Harrison began without preamble. The firefighter you refused proper seating to this morning, Anderson said sharply, his eyes boring into Mitchell with undisguised contempt. The same firefighter who just saved a passenger's life on the flight you forced him into economy seating. Mitchell's face drained of color. That was a standard security precaution based on irregular. I've reviewed your department's protocols extensively, interrupted FAA Regional Administrator Janet Walsh. None of them support discriminatory treatment based on uniform status or military appearance. What you did violated federal anti-discrimination guidelines. Harrison activated a wall screen showing security footage from the morning's incident. What I see here, he said grimly, is a distinguished public servant treated with contempt and discrimination while representing his department at a national memorial service. Anderson leaned forward. Ms. Mitchell, do you have any idea what you've done? 2 days later, Marcus stood at attention in Los Angeles, having completed his duties at the 9/11 memorial ceremony with the dignity and honor the occasion demanded. Despite the travel ordeal, he had delivered a moving tribute to the fallen firefighters, reading names with the reverence each hero deserved. The ceremony had been broadcast nationally, and his presence had brought comfort to countless families still grieving their losses. In a private reception room at the memorial site, Chief Anderson waited alongside David Harrison from United Airlines and several other officials. The past 48 hours had brought dramatic changes to everyone involved in the Denver airport incident. Captain Rivera, Harrison began, his tone respectful and contrite, I'm here to offer United Airlines' most sincere and public apology. Your treatment by our employee was completely unprofessional, discriminatory, and contrary to everything our company claims to stand for. Anderson stepped forward, his face showing both pride in his captain and anger at the injustice. Tell him about Mitchell. Harrison nodded grimly. Ms. Mitchell has been terminated from her position, effective immediately. The FAA investigation her actions triggered has cost United Airlines over $3 million in operational disruptions and compliance reviews, but more importantly, it exposed systemic issues in our customer service protocols that we are now completely overhauling. FAA Administrator Walsh added, the incident has prompted a nationwide review of airline treatment of uniformed personnel. We're implementing new federal guidelines to prevent this type of discrimination from happening to any service member, firefighter, or law enforcement officer. Harrison continued, we're also establishing the Rivera Protocol, new mandatory training for all customer service personnel on recognizing and properly accommodating uniformed first responders and military personnel. We'd value your input in developing this program. Marcus considered the request carefully. The irony isn't lost on me that if I had been in first class as originally planned, I might not have been positioned to help Mr. Martinez when he needed it most. Sometimes we end up exactly where we need to be, even when it's not where we plan to be. Chief Anderson smiled with paternal pride. That's the kind of wisdom that makes you leadership material, son. Harrison nodded appreciatively. Your perspective is exactly why we need your voice in this process. But there's more. He handed Marcus a tablet showing news coverage. "The passenger you saved, David Martinez, has made a full recovery. He's been telling every news outlet that will listen about the firefighter who saved his life after being treated like a criminal at the airport." The tablet showed David Martinez, healthy and smiling, holding his newborn granddaughter while being interviewed on a national morning show. "Captain Rivera didn't just save my life," Martinez was saying to the cameras. "He showed what real heroism looks like. While some people were judging him by his appearance, he was preparing to serve others. That's the difference between a real hero and the rest of us." The story had gone viral across social media platforms, with #Rivera Protocol trending nationally. Thousands of firefighters, police officers, and military personnel had shared their own stories of discrimination while in uniform, creating a groundswell of support for policy changes. "There's something else," Anderson said, producing an official document. "The mayor and city council have unanimously approved a commendation for your actions, both in saving Martinez's life and in representing Denver Fire with such dignity under difficult circumstances." Marcus accepted the recognition humbly. "Chief, this was never about me. It was about honoring the firefighters we lost on September 11th and showing that their sacrifice still means something." "Which is exactly why it matters," Anderson replied. "Your restraint, your professionalism, and your heroism under pressure, that's what those 343 brothers would have wanted to see in someone wearing their uniform." As the ceremony concluded, Marcus reflected on the journey from discrimination to vindication. The incident had become a catalyst for meaningful change in how uniformed personnel were treated during travel, potentially helping thousands of future travelers avoid similar indignities. The true measure of the uniform, he realized, wasn't in the respect it commanded from others, but in the actions of those who wore it. Heroes aren't defined by their treatment, but by their response to that treatment and their service to others. The story serves as a reminder that dignity under pressure and service to others remain the highest values, regardless of how we're perceived or treated. Comment below with your thoughts on discrimination against uniformed personnel, and share this story if it touched you. Your respect for those who serve makes all the difference. Subscribe for more stories of real American heroes.